Several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?
Well, that's pretty darn slick, I must say.
Wow.
You like the new intro, do you?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That's really good.
good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. This is where my opinionated panel, I'll bring in a minute, are invited to give their views on the news. Right. Several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Global Atheist News Review. Now, first of all, I've got to send the apologies and best wishes from Tercia. Poor girl's got a migraine and has given her apologies for not being able to attend this panel meeting. But this is where I have opinionated people who give their views on the news. And today we have Dread Pirate Higgs. Ahoy there.
Ahoy from Pastaland.
He's in British Columbia, way over in the west of Canada. We have Dr. Ty Wells from, you tell us, Ty, where are you?
We just did this twice, and you already forgot?
Okay, so that's where you're from. We've got Frank Lovell, who's in Kentucky. Welcome, Frank.
We're very close to Ty.
Yes, indeed.
He's in the state below Kentucky.
Yes, he's across the border, isn't he? Yeah. And we've got another American who is actually resident in this country right now.
That's right.
David has come over from America to attend the Humanist International Convention, which has been going on in Glasgow, but he's now moved down to a hotel in London, and he and I are going to meet up with the vice president, because David is the new president of Atheist Alliance International, and we're going to make a podcast with Bill Flavell, the VP. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to happen on Tuesday.
So am I. It's we have a great story to tell, so that'll be great.
Absolutely, yes, indeed. Right, plunging straight into the news. The first item this week is from Nigeria, where 31 people died in a crush in the southern city of Port Harcourt. The church was called the King's Assembly Church, and they were handing out food to the poor, some of whom had waited all night to get their handout of food. And the police claim that the crowd became tumultuous and uncontrollable, and the organizers failed to calm the situation. Unfortunately, many of those who died were women and children. What's your reaction to that, guys?
Well, I guess lots of people will be praying for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, it reminds me of those stories in the States when they have those sales during Christmas and they only have a few items and people rush in at 6 a.m. and then, in the name of love and brotherhood, crush the trachea of fellow shoppers.
Yeah. God certainly wasn't saving them.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Ty had made, some good points about security and exit control and, having a plan.
Right.
And so that, because what always happens, and as a former firefighter, the whole idea in any kind of situation like that is you want to have a plan so that you don't panic. And that's principally what happens. And that's the organizers too. Once they see the once they see it hitting the fan, they just lose control and they don't know how to get it back.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a big part of it.
And those are the words of a security man.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, Dread Pirate.
Yeah.
Captain and a fireman.
Yeah.
I'll throw this out. Loss of life is always tragedy, or is always tragic, and especially on a scale like this. And I don't fault any church that's willing to make the best effort to provide, services to people who are in need. I think the main learning lesson that we can take from this, so that it doesn't happen again, is that you can continue to be good, but do so with a safety plan first in mind. Safety is always number one, and especially when you're dealing with large masses of people who are desperate, who need things that you are offering at low cost, essentially.
Yeah, you want to anticipate. You want to anticipate that kind of scenario.
Yeah. And I out of fear of not being flippant, it's the idea of the charity that you are providing is great and can also be done by secular organizations. So secular organizations need to learn from this too. But the principles of safety aren't necessarily inherent in the goodwill or the good intentions or the heavenly purposing of the work that you're doing. You still have to think about the fact that you're working with human beings who are desperate, who are being moved to a singular location. And that comes with threats and risks. And you got to do whatever you can to mitigate that. And a lot of them are best taught in a secular mindset of what's human condition, what are the things that are inherently dangerous to people when they're around other desperate people, and what can we do to resolve that? And the good thing is we already know those rules, we know those principles, and so let's take this as a learning lesson so that at least it doesn't happen as often. But I do applaud anyone who's willing to help out those in need.
Absolutely. Yeah,
you have to be. It's about being pragmatic and practical.
Yep.
Those are two very important points.
Just get your act together before you start a stampede. Indeed.
Right. Like we say, humans individually are wonderful. Once they get into groups, it becomes a mob. And if it's a mob, the outcome is never pretty.
No, indeed. Staying with Africa, Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the leader of the Church of Scotland will together lead a prayer vigil for peace while visiting South Sudan next month. So,
well, we know how that's going to go.
Again, it's people doing the very least they can,
right,
for things that are important to the rest of the world. It's I've had people say, I don't know, I've had a bad back or something. Oh, I'll pray for you. Well, that's the very least you could do. So,
I'd much rather avoid the photo op and actually do something, like put political pressure on those hurting others and bring people together,
And that's what we're going to talk about when we meet up on Tuesday to make a podcast with you and Bill Lovell, the VP of Atheist Alliance International, isn't it, David?
Yeah.
Did I mention you're the new president of AAI?
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
It's quite an honor, actually. I'm very pleased.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to do, a lot of good stuff out there. In fact, just 2 days ago, the AAI had a huge win. There was an African young man who was placed into custody and was in custody for 8 months on the charge of disrupting the calm, so to speak. But he was an atheist who called into question the reality of God, or the lack thereof, and that got him arrested. And we were able to get him out of jail after 8 months.
Good for you.
Excellent news. Yeah, great. Okay. So, moving over to Israel, that hotbed of dispute that's been rumbling on for 2,000 years. We've had a march by thousands of flag-waving Israelis who have gone through the Muslim area of East Jerusalem's Old City in an event which, unsurprisingly, was seen as highly provocative by the Palestinians. In fact, the Palestinian presidency said that Israel was playing with fire. And the march was to celebrate Israel's capture of East Jerusalem in the 1967 war. Now, of course, what's going on here is that Israel regards the whole of Jerusalem as its capital. Most countries reject that, except, thanks to Donald Trump, the USA. Meanwhile, the Palestinians claim that the Israeli-occupied eastern part of Jerusalem is the capital of their future state, which is, Palestine, I guess. But that, of course, is ruled out by Israel. And so any political displays, marching, flag waving, etc., by either side are viewed by the other as direct challenges. What do you think of that, guys?
Well, that's really par for the course, isn't it?
Frank?
I fear it is all too common with a lot of decisions made there. I think what they're doing is they're violating the 11th commandment, which is lost. The lost 11th commandment, which is, rubbeth not your religion in your neighbor's faces.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really a huge provocation, and I can't imagine why they did that.
And they really did do it. I mean, listen to this. Some of the marchers shouted, "Death to Arabs," and "May your village burn."
Oh, my goodness.
This is acting like their enemy. I mean, I just don't get it.
Yeah. And if I may make a point, as a pastafarian, I've met with lots of challenges from government agencies who claim that we're just a mock religion and that we mock other people and their beliefs and whatnot, which is not the case, really. But that being said, there is something fundamental to the freedom of religious expression, and that is the right to offend. As a pastafarian, if you don't like what I have to say, well, you don't have to listen to it. But it doesn't mean I can't speak my mind about the impact of people's beliefs on government policy or their impact on my freedom to religious expression. The right to offend is pretty fundamental. So that's my opinion.
Definitely a human right to free speech.
But it's also
but of course, I mean, you can overstep that. As in this case, in all likelihood, is like if you're actively provoking the other side or walking through their neighborhoods and making fun of them, that's taking it a bit far.
It's
right?
a human responsibility to wisely use your freedom of expression. To think through, is what I'm about to say going to accomplish something good?
Yes.
Or just make me feel good at the expense of others.
Know when to bite your tongue.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because while I never want to paint any group as monolithic, you do have in that area, groups like Jewish Voice for Peace that actually works with the Palestinians.
Yeah.
So there are peace groups in that tinderbox that has been a tinderbox since the Crusades.
Yep.
If not before, working. But, as someone who is a former member of the chosen people, right, you always have to go back to the question of, well, what did God choose you for?
Suffering.
And if the choice, did God put you, if you're religious, which I'm an atheist, you would think that God would put you on the earth to be a voice for, or a vessel for peace.
Whoa.
Definitely not the biblical God, though, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I came here to be a sword.
Yeah, but I mean, there are some really good groups, like I said, like Jewish Voice for Peace and some others that are sensitive and are working, across the aisle. But you've got fanatics, and whether they're Arab fanatics or Jewish fanatics or evangelical fanatics are fanatics. They're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to try to find a comfortable space to actually have a conversation about peace.
No.
I don't know.
The biblical God is not exactly a good role model.
Right. Exactly.
I know the conflict over there is particularly hard to parse if you've never been there, or if you're an American, can't point to it in a map, right? But
Right.
if I were to make an example, I was trying to get gas this week, right? And there was a couple in front of me who was in front of the line getting our gas. And then the man finished putting in the gas. He put the gun pistol dispenser back, and he was walking around to his front of his car, and the wife sticks her hand out and she's like, "Did you remember to close the gas cap?" And he said, "Linda, I closed the gas cap." And she's like, "Check the gas cap." He's like, "I'm not checking it. I just closed the gas cap." And then before he was able to get in the car, he had to walk around to the other side of the car and look at the gas cap. And guess what? It was closed. And in my head, I was thinking that argument is not about the gas cap. Right? There is so many more things going on beyond that. And it's a lot easier for us to be like, Jerusalem, it's more sand. It's just more sand in a place. Why are you guys arguing with each other? It ain't about the sand.
Right.
This goes well beyond that.
Right.
There's definitely some previous going on there.
Yeah. So all of this is going on, is posturing, it's ego, it's blood. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So we can't just take a snapshot of the incident that we see. We have to realize that there's a muddled history going on here, and any sort of recourse is going to take a lot of empathy to get around.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy problem to solve.
Well, and this is something that really has to start working through the younger people.
Yes, it has to be cultural.
Because this intolerance, I think, is, just as we were seeing sort of a decrease or an increase in irreligiosity around the world, that as young people increasingly become irreligious, that maybe these tensions which are faith-based primarily, can be alleviated through reason and a common goal and a common humanity.
Yeah, I often say I blame the teachers because I used to be one, so I can say that. But it is an education problem. And you've got it's a cultural one based also on perspective. And there's a weird thing about perspective. It's called that little warning they put on rearview mirrors. I don't know if it's in England as well, but it's objects in rearview mirror are closer than they appear. Same thing can be set for timelines, right? And the thing is, you have to drive far enough without another incident happening for those things to shrink even further. But if it just keeps going on, all those bad intentions, those bad sentiments, they stay large in the rearview mirror. And we need to give ourselves a generation of time to breathe from that. That is so true, because, of course, we had effective wars between the Protestants and the Catholics here in the UK. But 500 years later, we're all pretty cool about it.
Very true.
Moving on.
Yeah.
You'll love
so there's
this.
hope. There's hope, basically, is what we're saying.
Yes.
I like it.
You'll love this item because there's a 75-year-old cult leader in northeastern Thailand who was arrested recently, and he's now in court. And one of the charges brought against him is the unlawful disposal of bodies. Apparently, the local authorities discovered at least 11 corpses on the property of this cult leader, and police determined that they were the bodies of his former followers. And he still had at least 12 people living with him. But listen to this. His devotees, his name's Tawi Nanra, which is a Thailand name. His devotees believed that the leader's urine, mucus, even his excrement could cure disease and would regularly consume them.
Oh,
Yeah.
is this like Trump's bleach for curing COVID?
Yeah. Injecting bleach or
Yeah.
whatever. There's no end to the strange things that people somehow convince themselves of. Again, it all boils down to more critical thinking, and man, if that could be taught at a younger age and more regularly, that kind of stuff would happen less often, I'm sure.
Well, the scary thing is, this cult leader managed to persuade his followers that that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And Trump has gathered somehow up several million of my countrymen into thinking that he's got some great ideas too. It really is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they were eating excrement, it's no surprise that 11 of them are now dead.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, what do you say? I mean, except people they thought they were getting closer to God. That's the that's the thing. When you're so deep in it, and you talk to people who've been in cults, mild ones to obviously like these, and it's like they believe to every fiber of their being that what they are doing in the time that they are doing it serves as a divine purpose. Like these people who kill themselves and think they're going up on a spaceship. You know, I mean, there's no you can't reason. There's no element. There's no entree for reason in something like that. You have to literally deprogram.
And ultimately, too, right? I mean, it doesn't matter, because we hear these stories all the time. The details are essentially irrelevant. And you could take a person from the spaceship cult and tell them the details of this cult, and they would show their faces of disgust,
right? And
vice versa. I mean,
those people are crazy. Exactly.
Yeah, those people are crazy, but what I'm doing is perfectly reasonable.
Right.
Yeah, so it's way more fundamental than any details that we could kind of grimace at.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in biochemistry. And so the weird thing that I'm thinking about is we have a guy who's making excrement that people are consuming as a cure for what they believe is diseases through this, holy man. But on the flips and on the flip side, people are aghast when they hear that story. Yet 50% of those people believe that there was once upon a time a snake that gave dietary advice to nudists, right? And when you think about it, it's like at least the excrement is something that you can hold. Like I can have a fist full of that, and it might fix something. It might, but there ain't no way a snake is talking from my academic pursuits. I can tell you that's not possible.
Right.
And so if you were to tell me which of the two is the most shocking, that half the people believe that fairy tale, or that there was one guy in Thailand who had 13 people around him who thought that could help fix their pink eye, I'm more shocked about the 50% of the people who believe in the steak.
Yeah, exactly.
So
how
where's our
different?
context here?
Excellent point.
How different is eating the man you worship's excrement from eating the blood and drinking the blood and eating the body of Christ?
Right.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people already do. And my final thought on this is Kool-Aid now available in flavor urine?
Yeah. Is that a chocolate bar floating in the pool?
I just hope this doesn't give the folks that watch this on YouTube later any thoughts like, hey, now there's a good idea.
There should be a waiver at the beginning of the show. Do not practice these things at home.
Exactly. Yeah, don't try it at home. Yeah. So we're coming to the States now, because you may or may not be aware, you Americans, because and one Canadian. Normally I have a mixture of people from around the world on my panel, but today,
last time I checked, Canada is also North America. But okay, that's totally fine.
Yeah. You try telling Canadians that they're also USA members and see
you
how far that gets.
You tell a Canadian who's American that they're not American, they get upset about that too. It's all based on who you go to.
Yes. So anyway, you may or may not know that there's an election coming up for the governorship of Oklahoma, and one of the Republican candidates, I don't know if you are aware, but Governor Stitt has recently enacted very stringent laws against abortion, which is happening around the US at the moment, isn't it? Oh, and I want to give a plug for my next week's Free Thought Hour show, because I have an ethicist coming, Blay Whitby, and he and I will discuss abortion as one of the issues of the day that we need to come to some sort of ethical agreement about. Anyway, getting back to this story, this candidate, Republican Mark Sherwood, says he's going to be even more strict against not only abortion but also contraception, because he believes that life, listen to this, begins in God before it begins at conception.
Oh, God.
Prove it.
Right.
You're stunned. You're stunned, aren't you?
No, it's
Speechless.
Yes.
Yeah. This is the culmination of 40 years of deliberate action by the religious right and to really swallow the beast and take the body politic and move it to a religious state, and it's very, very sad. I mean, I'm fortunate. I live in New York City, so there's New York, and then there's the rest of America. in many cases.
Well, tell that to the Californians.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got both.
California has a Republican governor, though. So
yeah. But the scary thing is that Roe v. Wade is on the docket, and there are probably about 19 Republican governors who say the minute Roe is struck down, if it is struck down by the Supreme Court, which looks like it will, they will enact the strict anti-abortion laws, and thereby making what is 50 years of legality illegal. And the question I have is, where does it end? Because there are a lot of other things on the docket, like who you can love,
gay rights, and
and all these other things. And so, I don't want to be like Henny Penny and say the sky is falling. You can definitely see the writing on the wall here that this is a very religiously conservative agenda that is being played out now. It is not a secular democratic agenda for the population.
Yeah,
and we do have the religious wrong to thank for that.
Yeah,
at least that's what I call them every chance I get.
Yes,
the religious wrong.
Yeah.
The opposite of religious right. Yeah. Well, you won't be surprised to hear that this candidate, Mark Sherwood, is an alternative medicine practitioner. And
no, he wouldn't be surprised to hear that at all.
and he was adopted, and he says that God wanted his mother to be raped, and that's why he contends that every birth, every life is pre-planned by God.
An inch or two later, and he's eating somebody's shit.
Right.
Yep.
Yes.
An inch or two down the road, and he's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear his views on evolution, but I think or natural selection, but I think I already know them.
Well,
yes.
You know what they call alternative medicine that works?
Yes.
Medicine.
Yeah. Anyway, if he gets elected, this is what he's promised. He's going to eliminate all abortions. At the moment, you can. There are grounds for having an abortion. You know, if you've been raped, or if it's incest, or if your life as a mother is at stake, or if your baby's deformed, you know. But he's going to eliminate all of those excuses. He's going to criminalize performing an abortion as a felony murder, and he compares unsanctioned abortions to the elementary school massacre in Uvalde, Texas.
Oh my God.
Don't elect him, guys. Don't elect him. I know you're not in Oklahoma, but
Sure.
don't elect him.
John Richards, if I showed you a map of the United States with all the states outlined, would you know which one Oklahoma is?
Yes, it's
good.
Just above Texas.
You are like in the 2 percentile of Americans who are capable of doing that. It's like, it's not very good. Not a lot of people know where Oklahoma is. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. My concern. How much do I want to go into this? It's
All of it.
in my head. Democracy exists not to make rules that people need to be governed by, but it's to serve the interests of the people that make up that democracy. And what we have here is an example of a skewed form of democracy where it's just about enforcing rules from a dogma and not so much the greater interests of people, and where they have options and have choices.
Exactly.
And I think because of that, we suffer because we're spending our time dealing with this very fundamentally, the purpose of democracy is to be in the interest of its people. And we're spending time trying to like fix that when we could be fixing, in my head, far greater problems that are more intricate. And when pressured to keep a job or to maintain power, people tend to obscure things into very simple like concepts where this is the bad guy. I will make sure I'm not the bad guy. But like the obfuscation of this concept really detracts from a good government that could deal with far more meaningful things like homelessness or poverty in America, or feeding people, or better education or better infrastructure for stuff. Yet we always have to take all of our energy and time and focus on, well, should women have the right to do what they want with their own bodies? Yes, that's already a law. We already have that in the books. Why are we undoing this? Why are we taking our time on this? Just cut the loss, and let's move on to like continuing to help people rather than detracting these.
Well, democracy can only be as good as the education of the electorate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like I was saying on our other show there about the the Freedom Convoy in Canada, this very, very small percentage of persons who don't like mask or vaccine mandates, depriving people of their freedom and just making a bunch of noise because they figure that, despite their numbers, that as loud as they can be, that makes them important and have a worthy message, which doesn't work that way to me.
Yeah. Was it Shakespeare who said the empty vessels make the most sound?
And the other one is methinks thou dost protest too much.
Yeah. So if you're going to keep your electorate ignorant, they won't be able to make informed decisions, and you will be able to feed them polarized ideas, like in the old cowboy movies, the bad guys in the black hat.
Right. Yeah. So if this really scary thing is, if you look at, you can Google this, if you look up like 1960s, 1970s Iraq, right, you would see basically people who look more cool than us in terms of fashion, in terms of look, in terms of like the stylings that they have. It just looked like everyone was having a good time. And the idea of that it could ever turn out to what Iraq looks like now, with this very oppressive state government that has very religious foundings and ties to it, almost one and the same. It should be an example that this could happen to anybody, and we could very well be on a timeline that's similar to that, unless if we are willing to take meaningful protections of this world that we live in.
Over here, we were worried last January when you had that insurrection at the White House.
Oh, yeah.
Thought, you could be the next Iraq. Yeah. Okay, on that bleak note, I'm going to move to David City, New York.
Yeah, right.
Where
New York.
Yeah, last Thursday, between 6:30 and 4 p.m. on Saturday, St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church in Brooklyn's Park Slope neighborhood.
I used to live there. I know it well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's known as the Notre Dame of that zone, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was broken into, and a $2 million gold relic was removed, stolen. It's a tabernacle. I thought that was more of a Jewish thing than a Roman Catholic thing, but anyway. And the statue of an angel had its head chopped off.
Ooh.
So this has been described by the Diocese of Brooklyn as a brazen crime of disrespect and hate. The church wasn't open. It was closed for construction at the time. And there were security cameras in operation, but the recordings were stolen too. So
inside job.
Yeah. Let me just say, I was probably on an airplane going to London, so I was not involved with it.
Yeah. That kind of behavior is inexcusable, regardless of what your thoughts about religion are.
Right.
It doesn't justify that kind of behavior at all. It goes back to education is the way to change people's minds, not bully them, not break their stuff, and
Right.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, theft is theft, wherever the victim is and whatever organization they belong to. But listen to what the pastor, I would have called him a priest, but anyway, this item designates him a pastor, the pastor of St. Augustine Church. He's said, to know that a burglar entered the most sacred space of our beautiful church and took great pains to cut into a security system is a heinous act of disrespect. He thinks that it's a religious disrespect, because something else they did was they broke into where the safe where the sacristy is, in the sacristy where the holy bread was consecrated as the body of Christ. That was taken and that was thrown on the altar. So it's obviously desecration in a religious sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, some of that might have been to disguise, a $2 million chunk of gold. There's a lot of people that don't have any particular animosity toward any particular religion that might like to steal a couple of $1 million, especially something like gold. You can melt it down once you've done that. It's untraceable. So it could be some of that was intended to disguise the real motive, which was, or could have been the real motive, was greed, to get that chunk of gold.
I mean, no one just goes into a church and knows exactly what to steal. This had to have been cased out. I mean, clearly someone with some group, probably not just one individual, had real intentionality here. And it is horrific because, any type of vandalism is bothersome. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like greed with a bit of desecration on the side when they chopped off the angel. Anyway,
you never know. I mean, it could have been. I mean, because the security cameras were cut, so like David points out, the place was obviously would have been cased. Yeah, and perhaps it was someone affiliated with the church who had a beef, or some other. I mean, it's pretty hard to say.
I would suspect
more
that
specific
there was
information.
Yeah. There's some inside connection there. There had to be.
Yeah, there's not really enough evidence to make a decision at the moment, is there?
Yeah.
But another question is, what's the church doing with a $2 million box anyway? I mean, shouldn't they be doing more Christian things with their money?
Well, I mean, that's been a question since the Church of the Vatican was, instituted.
I've thought that a long time.
Yeah, define Christian, because like I think you may have overestimated their lack of love for money.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Finally, guys, still in America.
Oh my gosh! Sorry. Can I make one last statement?
Yeah.
Sure.
God creates everything. He owns everything, yet still asks for money and charity and tithing.
Yes.
Like
Right.
it is fundamentally a Christian thing to be always asking for money and having money and asking for it, despite the fact that their God made it. It's one of the most baffling concepts that most.
Mhm.
And what's he going to do with it? I never see him in the queue.
What's he gonna buy?
Well, and here again, Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's." Well, if God's got, what are you rendering unto Caesar if it isn't money?
Yes.
Why are you giving God money?
Yeah, and isn't Caesar? I mean, isn't Caesar essentially a thing that God made? So, like, what's going on here?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all a puzzle to me. So finally, leaving where were we? New York, and going to the Amy's Cornerstone Church. I think this is in Iowa, which is, if you want to know where that is, it's more or less in the center, but up a bit, getting nearer to the lakes. So
north of Oklahoma.
Yeah, north of Oklahoma, exactly. Yeah. We're good at geography, aren't we? Eh?
Hey, you guys are better than me.
So anyway, there was a shooting. Now, this is not new. America has 2 or 3 every week. But this particular one, a tragic shooting involving 2 young members of the Cornerstone Church community in Ames, or however you say the name of that city. Sorry, everything's Ames, is it? Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Frank. But there was an adult male who shot these 2 young female victims and then killed himself. Now, we don't know at the moment what his motivation was, but it did take place in the car park of the church, and the women were members of the church community. So that's yet another shooting tragedy to add to the previous 239 that have happened so far this year.
Yeah. As you point out, there are hundreds of mass shootings, and mass shooting is defined as more than 4 or more people in a single incident, and there are hundreds of those in the United States every year.
Well, it's so interesting because I think it was the New York Times reported that there have been more mass shootings in 2022 than there have been days in 2022 so far.
Wow.
And that is a sad, sorrowful statistic to have to live with, wherever you are in the United States. Yeah.
Well, we don't really want to get too political, but in the last 30 years, the mass shooting events in the UK has averaged 1 every decade. And what's the big difference? We don't have access to guns. Anyway, on that rather depressing note, guys, I'm going to thank you very much for taking part in this event. And ask you I'm going to thank our audience for watching, and in the future when it becomes a podcast as well. And I'm going to play the outro.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming, guys.
Right.
Wouldn't be a show without you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the